Good evening. Thank you for having me here. It's sort of a short flying visit for me. I have a Sanskrit exam tomorrow morning. My max on Tuesday. The CBSE is going on in the 10th standard, and it looks like parents are writing exams more than children are. So with that, my conflicts of interest are please note these. So let's talk about basal insulin. I think the important thing is many of us remember the introduction of a long-acting analog of basal insulin some years ago, and how it sort of changed our practice. When we bring in new therapies, the most important thing to remember, and the lesson that I've learned from 20 years of these is simply this, that you don't have revolutions in medicine. What you have is a stepwise improvement that improves the options and the number of options that you have in your armamentarium. The role of the physician is rather the art of trying to figure out who deserves the most. Evidence helps, topics help, these talks help, but ultimately you need to sort of figure out which patient matches which kind of drug, and that's really what happens. So you know that what is the important part of basal insulin? The thing is that the longer the insulin acts, the shorter is the wag of its tail, which means that when insulins act for less than 24 hours, there is a sort of a glycemic variability that occurs towards the tail end of its action. The longer the duration of action, the glycemic variability is postponed till you have another dose in. So what really happens is you get a flat duration of action, and when that happens, the risk of hyperglycemia lowers. And that simply is how basal insulins have made most of our lives very easy. So it gives you this balance between getting your glucose as normal, at the same time not having hyperglycemia, which means you can push up the dose of insulin without having a greater fear of hyperglycemia. So whenever you see the studies, whenever you see this, bear this in mind, and that's what basal insulin is doing, right? And almost every guideline writing society talks about starting insulin with basal insulin. The first big one, of course, is an improvement that happened between NPH and glargine. And both of these are amazing, and glargine itself is an amazing insulin. So when you compare another insulin with glargine, you will notice that the differences are marginal. That's like, comparing any other new agent with statins. They're already blockbusters. So if something has to be better than that, it's usually going to be marginal. This is degludec. All of you know about this drug. It's a long this thing that keeps adding up and slowly releasing it. The zinc phenol formulation, right? There's a phenol depletion that occurs, the zinc diffuses, and then this becomes, and the duration of action is because of this very, very long fatty acid chain. Glargine 300 is sort of an improvement in glargine, and what really happens is that when in their bid to try to make 300 units in a mill, what really happened was that it became compressed. The small volume, it's compact, smaller surface area, and what really happened was that the release is much slower. And when the release is much slower, the longer it acts. So you have two different long-acting insulins that are competing for the next generation glargine space. So the initial trials these are all compared with glargine 100. And remember that, again, you already have a very good insulin, and what you're trying to do is to compare one or the others. The second thing that you want to understand is that while you will have A1C as primary endpoints in many of these studies, remember that many of these studies are also treat to target studies, which means that most of them will be non-inferiority related. So when you have treat to target studies, don't look for A1Cs that are very different from each. So you won't find superiorities in A1Cs. On the other hand, you will find differences in hypoglycemia. So this is IDEG versus glargine. This is glargine versus 300 versus glargine 100. We won't spend too much time on this because now we already have head-to-head trials. So ultimately what it shows is glargine 300 had a lower rate of any time in nocturnal hypoglycemia, And IDEG, when it compared to glargine, had a lower rate of nocturnal hyperglycemia. And you will see this even in the CONCLUDE trial, that the nocturnal hyperglycemia bit with IDEG is much better. On the other hand, the diurnal hyperglycemia seems to be a little better with glargine. Now, this is the glucose infusion rate and the pharmacodynamic, the PK/PD rate with glargine 300 versus IDEG 100. What is interesting is there are two particular studies in which you will see one done by Sanofi and one done by Novo, each showing opposite results. The caveat is that both of these are not the same comparisons. For example, this is glargine 300 versus 100 that Sanofi put up. And the one that Novo did was glargine 300 versus IDEG 200. So basically, when you put these two studies together, these are basically apples and oranges. So anyway, when the PK/PD is interesting, it's as interesting only as long as you don't have clinical trials that look at the whole products as a whole. So let's forget all of this and go to the clinical trials. So the clinical pharmacy is this. There are trial-level meta-analysis, and then, of course, there are head-to-head comparisons. So let's look at some of these. The head-to-head comparisons are the ones that help us the most. There are two head-to-head comparisons. One is done by Sanofi, the other is done by Novo, right? Again, remember, this is glargine 300 versus IDEG 100. This is glargine 300 versus IDEG 200. So again, we're comparing apples and oranges in both of these. The second thing to remember is that this is an insulin-naive study. These are people who are already on insulin. I'm putting these right in front so that when we go through these studies, you have this bang at the dot of your head that these are not really the same kind of studies. They're different studies. The third part, of course, I'll tell you is some problems with the CONCLUDE trial that had with meters that tells you how things can go very wrong with the trials themselves. So the BRIGHT study is a very good study. I really like this. It's a multi-center, open label, 1:1 randomized. All the check boxes tick off nicely in this patient. Remember, it's a non-inferiority study. The CONCLUDE study was a superiority study. I'll get to it in a moment. Right? People went to screening, all the usual stuff, greater than 25 and less than 40 BMI. They should have been OAD use or GLP-1 RAs, no prior insulin use. And then they were started on insulin based on the manufacturer's recommendation for use. So glargine 300 was used as 0.2 per kg, and IDEG was started at 10 units per labeling. So you'll find this famous war about the doses in this. At the end of it, remember that glargine usually requires a slightly higher dose, irrespective of what anybody tells you. And IDEG uses a slightly lower dose, irrespective of what anybody else tells you. But you will find these hash splitting in all these discussions. Ultimately, it was non-inferior. Remember, it's a non-inferiority study. They were bang in the middle. The A1Cs were fantastic. Both did at week 20. There was around 1.5 or more reduction in the A1Cs. Remember? Okay? And this is what you saw. This is a change in the baseline. Nothing to choose between these drugs. Right. Now, one of the interesting differences is that during the titration phase, there was a lower incidence of hyperglycemia with glargine 300. And this is something interesting simply because that most of the problems occur in titration phase. This is one. Second is that your titration phase doses predict what your doses are going to be at the end of a year or two. So those are the two reasons titration is important. Although the overall study, there was no difference. In the titration phase, there was slightly lower incidence of hyperglycemia with glargine 300. And since this is a Sanofi study, this is important for them. But it's a good point to remember that titration phase hypoglycemia can drive your patients away from you. So that way it makes sense. This is nocturnal hypoglycemia. It's a little better with glargine. So in the titration phase, things were better with glargine 300. At the end, there was not much difference. So if you'll notice this, over a period of time, these were distinct. So the one thing that you can use to sort of say which is better, whichever costs better, right? This is the other study, this is the CONCLUDE study. Remember, the CONCLUDE study is an open label randomized study. It's active control, it's 2-arm, it's multi-center. IDEG 200, we don't have it in our country yet, right, versus glargine 300. And this was a superiority study. So they said that the primary objective was number of severe or confirmed symptomatic hypoglycemic episodes during the maintenance phase. Now, one of the nice things about these guys, the principal investigators, was that they actually came up and fessed up that there was a problem with the glucose meter during the first 36 weeks. And then patients had to go back and actually get it. I really applaud them because most people would just brush it under the carpet, but the principal investigators were nice enough to say, you know what, we screwed up. But remember, all the things that can go wrong in a study, that includes defective glucose meter. So the integrity of the investigators is very important. But there itself, the study took a big hit because of the flaws in the glucometers, right? So they had a 16-week titration period. Defective glucose meter was used throughout. SNBG was overestimated, right? So the patients were likely to be overexposed. The 36-week transition period had defective glucose meters, and some people got new glucose meters. So different patients used defective glucose meters for a different length of time. And then they had a new glucose meter from the 36th week till the end of the study, right? This was the conclude study results. What important was that it did not meet its primary objective. So it was not superior. And therefore, one of the things you want to remember is that any time a study does not meet its primary objective, everything else that it tells you is only exploratory. You can make some wild guesses based on other data, but don't read further into that study. And I don't want to get into ITT versus what is it called? Intention to treat versus the other way of doing this, but remember that it matters. So in the nocturnal hypoglycemia rate, this was the difference between IDEC 200 versus glargine. The severe hypoglycemia rate, 0.25 versus 2.7%. The total insulin dose was 12% lower with IDEC 200. However, the body weight gain was 1.18. Again, everything as you expected. Lower dose requirement with IDEC, higher dose listed with glargine 300, but otherwise nothing more to write out. So this is the overall symptomatic hypoglycemia during the total treatment period. And this is the nocturnal symptomatic hypoglycemia. You will notice that, but the primary endpoint was 0.88, 0.73 to 1.06. Remember, it was a superiority study, so the upper limit of the confidence interval should have been on this side of unity. So these are nice to note, but these are again exploratory. Again, remember that we are comparing IDEC glargine 300 and IDEC 200. It does not mean that what applies to IDEC 200 applies to IDEC 100 also. All right? So this is in the maintenance phase. I don't want to go too much into it. Just remember, this is a non-inferiority. This is a superiority study. Insulin naive, insulin experienced. The primary endpoint was A1C. Primary endpoint was symptomatic hypo. Non-inferiority was established, failed to show superiority. So at this point of time, we don't have much to separate out the two insulins. All right? So let's look at some other stuff. What about EGFR? What you will notice is that at lower EGFRs, you will find that GLA 300 actually did quite well at lower EGFRs and without the hypoglycemia. Again, remember all the subgroup analysis in the BRIGHT study are also exploratory. Having said that, you will find some interesting data. For example, we don't do time and range in these studies anyway, but mean percentage of time with hypoglycemia less than 70 was lower with glargine 300. Mean percentage of time with severe hypoglycemia was lower. Also, the percentage of time with nocturnal hypoglycemia was also lower. Remember, they did not do continuous analysis in many patients. This is looking at older patients, and to me, this was the big surprise because I would expect IDEC to do very, very well in persons more than 70 years of age. On the other hand, you found that in older patients who greater than 70, and remember, most older patients have lower EGFRs, there was much better A1Cs. So these are the highlights from the BRIGHT study. There's a greater A1C in renal impaired. Again, remember all of these are exploratory, but these are good points to look at. Greater A1C reduction in those greater than 70 years of age, more achieved glycemic targets with hypoglycemia, and of course there were some quality indicators that were looked at, increased treatment satisfaction, less anxiety. So to summarize, let's go back to what basal insulin is all about. The way I look at basal insulin, it's a trainer insulin. It's like giving somebody a bicycle, a little trainer wheels, and tell them to self-titrate to to move along, not to fall down, right? To be able to adjust their own insulin, get the hang of insulin till, they go to the big guns like adding more insulin, which Banshi talked about. In this way, you want insulins that are safer, that don't cause much hyperglycemia, and people can titrate well. Should you switch from one insulin to another? Probably not. If your insulin works well, it's cost effective, it does the trick, use it. On the other hand, the patient is experiencing hyperglycemia, requires greater quality of life, longer basal acting insulin, switch. Irrespective, learn to use one insulin well, know its goods and bads, and persist with it. And remember that having 3 insulins does not mean you need to throw away one of them. You just keep it in your hand and use it for the right patient. So understand, so for example, where would I niche some of these insulins? Older patients, lower EGFR, and those who need a lower cost insulin. So that's the way I would look at it. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you again for inviting me here. Appreciate it.